Hi, my name is Mohammad Alif Siddique. I am from Bangladesh. I am an international student studying in Taylor's University. Currently, I am studying Bachelor of Laws degree here. Now, I am going to start my presentation. The question was about the formalities in land law. So now I am going to answer the question. In English land law, formality is a common occurrence. Rather, it is a necessity of law that matters of substance be codified in a precise way to have legal implications, in order to ensure that only parties that comply with formalities can have an equitable or legal property interest. The law imposes statutory provisions on all land transactions. The Statutes of Frauds 1677 was the first to introduce formalities in some commercial transactions. These set out standards that it must be met for transactions involving the transfer of land to be legal, and has a specific place in the law because of its distinctiveness, and as a result special procedures must be followed before a disposition can take effect. As can be seen, most legal rights cannot normally be created without writing and a deed. Formalities are very important when creating contracts for the sale of land, since they help avoid accidental and unintended establishment of interest. Additionally, they offer written documentation of the purchase, which helps in avoiding any probable ownership problems in the future. However, formality requirements may sometimes be violated, such as when an owner tries to avoid claiming a legal claim or challenges one that obviously intended. Meanwhile, landowners may consider it beneficial or unhelpful. This presentation focuses at whether formalities limit a landowner's ability to manage their property autonomously. There are two types of autonomies. They are personal and moral. Personal autonomy is the ability to self-regulate without other influences. The self-imposition of moral value judgments on the decision-making process is referred to as moral autonomy. On the one side, the restrictive statutes limit the landowner's personal autonomy because these prevent him from transferring the proprietary interest in the way that he considers appropriate. In the Queen case, the court determines that the claimant's possession of a document is not a deed, since the wording is unclear. The Sharma case results in a strict voiding of the entire agreement, since it does not adhere to formal validity. This demonstrates how formally demands impose limits on the personal autonomy of landowners. However, the law does allow for exceptions to the formality guidelines, allowing some personal autonomy, as long as the lease complies with Law of Property Act 1925, Section 54, Subsection 2. The landowner may provide an informal lease without a deed. People create informal periodic tenancies, which is recognized by laws giving exceptions to the general formality requirements. Young demonstrates that how the court is willing to consider the agreement's intent and issue a decision that promotes justice even in situations when no agreement is enforceable due to formality compliance. In fact, when a landowner makes a deed or contract for his property, the formality requirements might support his moral autonomy. The owner is likely to think about and reflect on the content, including any ethical implications, given that the document may have legal consequences in the future. Similar points are made by Chrisley in his explanation of how formalities urge the parties to deliberate and refrain from making drastic decisions. There is a contradiction between the court's aim for a fair outcome and the strict formality requirements. No one is shocked by the parties' justice. Benefits and drawbacks that can subject the landowner to need to be properly considered. The preservation of the evidence is the benefit of formality that is most immediately apparent. The channeling function, this benefit has been recognized as one of the most crucial formalities functions. In the event of disagreements, the landowner may refer to conditions of the transaction as negotiated and protect their rights in accordance therewith. For information on the nature of the transaction, the length of any rights and the consideration. For instance, they can refer to the written agreement. Naturally, all unforeseen circumstances are previously noted at the commencement of each transaction. Therefore, the procedure's difficulty was reduced when the proprietor sought legal counsel prior to any sale of his property. Considering that human memories are unreliable, this is preferable to complete informality. As example, spoken agreement. If one of the parties asserted that he was exempt from liability because he was unaware of the transaction's legal implications and nature, he would be unable to do so because he had already signed the relevant document. As a result, the rights of landowners are safeguarded. This final advantage has been described as one of the most important functions of formalities. To ensure that the rights of the landowner to autonomy are not violated, these advantages must be greater than the disadvantages. In the case of Paid and Paid, Lord Hudson stated that it appears grotesque to imagine a typical married couple spending the long winter evenings working out agreements over their possessions. It is unfair to expect couple to think about their property rights while the relationships are still strong. Residents of the land continue to make payments to the mortgage holders and contribute financially to the purchase of homes, but they show little interest in the land's potential as an investment. The statute established a requirement that certain classes of contracts must follow specific formalities. Most of the time, the landowners thought that buying a house should only be done to fulfill the need for shelter, not to gain wealth. The landowner might have believed that everyone already understood one another and overlooked the value of formalities. For instance, a landowner may have self-induced emotional attachments that lead her to believe that a conversation regarding the parties' distinct property rights will break their close ties. The requirements needed to establish a commitment appear to be comparable to those needed to sell land outright. Formalities may have prevented the party from acting freely and independently at their choice in this situation by making them pause and consider how to sort out their separate rights. It is not desirable to ask a landowner to go through all the inconveniences, which are frequently against their actual interests, only to comply with the formality unless they mean to use their property in a business setting. For instance, a financially strapped landowner would have to take out a personal loan or even use almost all their funds only to cover the transactional fees charged by the land registry office. At this point, it appears that the landowner's right to autonomy have been violated by the formalities requirements. Therefore, it is necessary to weigh the advantages and disadvantages, considering the outcome to determine if the rights of landowners to autonomy have been violated. We can easily determine whether it constituted a threat to the landowner if we assess it in terms of the consequences in the absence of formalities rather than its advantageous or harmful aspects. As the word formality implied, the rule is that just because something is conducted in a clear, organized manner and the landowner must deal with the legal consequences, does not necessarily mean that it is for the worse. Certainties are not guaranteed in the absence of formality. The landowner's rights were no longer protected because there were no rules or parameters to be followed. On the other hand, formality serves as a legal framework to prevent any ambiguity. Formality is merely a tool to ensure the clarity, even though it imposes some obligations that landowners may find difficult. The writing requirement did serve as a proof of land transaction. It's like our modern method of recording transaction. In conclusion, because formality served as a shield and sword to guard against and ensure future problems, landowners cannot afford to lose it. Examine the long-term effects and how the landowner resolves issues regarding his rights without regard to formality. The owner of the land can be approached and told, "This is my land, and if you want to show me the evidence that is not, please present it to me." To clarify, formality does not violate the landowner's rights to autonomy, but rather protects those rights. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.